All right, I figure we can get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Vadim, and I am a FHIR consultant with FHIR. I've been working with FHIR for a while now, 5 years, since 2014. I started with it back in Australia when I worked as a clinical information modeler, and now I'm a FHIR consultant for FHIR worldwide. I've consulted for a variety of organizations, from startups to huge corporations to national bodies. And I build a fair bit of FHIR tools as well. I've built registry.fi.org. I've built WindTunnel, which is a server performance testing tool. I'm now working on a Hammer FHIR instance validator and a few others. And as part of my day job, I use a lot of FHIR tooling. So this session will be covering a whole breadth of FHIR tooling, giving you an overview of what it does, and hopefully giving you a better idea of what's out there, what you can use in your job as well. If you have a question during the session, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to ask right away. So, these are all the tools that I'll be covering in this session. We have a Donna API, we have a profiling tool, we have something for R on FHIR, for statistics. We've got a publishing tool, we've got a FHIR server, and we've got a couple of command line tools. The first one, that's the FHIR API. We maintain the canonical API for FHIR. It is cross-platform. It runs on Windows, Mac, Linux, and it runs on .NET Core and .NET Framework. It has the complete REST API, so you can create, read, delete resources with it easily, as well as conditionally read, update, delete. It also comes with a complete FHIR data model, so there are POCO classes available, so you can create your FHIR instances pretty easily. It has FHIR path implemented in it as well, so if you need to do data extraction, if you have a FHIR path, you can run that on a FHIR instance, and you can extract data from a FHIR instance using FHIR path. It also supports validation, so in case you're building your own server, for example, and you want to validate that incoming resources are conforming to a specific data requirement, you can use the .NET API to do that validation for you. And it is distributed as NuGet packages. Does this make sense? Does anybody have any questions? Has anybody tried it out? Good, good, good. Okay, I'll show an example of how it works later on. At first, I'll cover off all the tools in an overview, and then I'll do a live code demo, which is always dangerous, but I'll try it anyway to show you how it actually works in practice. So that's the .NET API. You can do quite a lot with it. Next is the Forge profiling tool. It's not cross-platform. It's only for Windows, but it is, in my opinion, the best, but let's say one of the best profiling tools out there. If you need to build a FHIR profile to constrain the data that is coming in, you can use Forge to do it. It is a pretty smart tool. It has real-time validation, so if you try and invalidate FHIR spec in some way, it'll instantly tell you, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, which is pretty good about it. It supports derived profiles, so if you have profiles and you want to constrain things even further, for example, if you want to take like an Argonaut profile and you need to constrain things even further, you can do that with Forge, and you can upload your profiles up on Simplifier. And I'll cover what Simplifier does later on. And also with FHIR packages coming into FHIR's world, Forge supports packages as well, reading and creating them. Yep.
Just not familiar with any of the products, so if you can also give the context of who generally will be using these tools and in which phase, development or runtime on the server.
Yes.
How does it fit in?
For sure. That's a good point. So if we go back a little bit, with FHIR.NET API, you will be using this pretty much if you're using the .NET stack. If you're writing a FHIR client or if you're writing a FHIR server, you would use the .NET API to do this. Forge.
Microsoft guys said that they're building on the .NET API.
Yep, Microsoft open source servers are built on the .NET API. There's a few other FHIR servers. Pretty much everybody is using the .NET API. Yeah. The Forge profiling tool, this is handy if the cases where I use it is in national contexts. For example, I'm working on a project in Sweden. They do all of their prescriptions, just about 99% of them electronically. We're going to be doing them using FHIR. So people are going to send them prescription information, are going to be sending them prescriptions, and they want to ensure that the prescriptions that are getting sent to them are conforming to a set of rules, right? Let's say it has a Swedish national identifier, so we can identify what patient the prescriptions were, and etc. The FHIR prescription, by default, it doesn't require that you have any identifiers in your data, never mind Swedish identifiers. So for the Swedish use case, they can mandate, hey, if you're sending us a prescription, it needs to have an identifier of a patient in this format. So national bodies will be doing this. And generally, if you're accepting data from other people, if you're setting up your own FHIR servers, you might want to consider a profile to constrain and be certain that the data you're getting is good, clean data for your use case. If you're on the client side, if you're on app side, well, you would be the one making sure that your data conforms to that profile. So you wouldn't really needing to use profiles at all times, except perhaps during the development phase. So when your client is sending data, you'd validate that the data you've generated conforms to this profile. But otherwise, you don't really need to do it always at runtime. This is just development time for clients. But if you're accepting data, this is both design time and runtime all times.
In that last case, the developer, the client, would they actually just use Forge, or
the profile will be published by the person who is accepting the data. So the person who's accepting data, they'd use Forge to create a profile. Yeah, and you just take the profile as is. So the client, they wouldn't really need to use Forge, not unless they are creating their own internal profiles for their own use, let's say. Yeah. Good. The FHIR API is an API for the R statistical language. So if you're a data scientist who's using R, you can use this API, and it's pretty lightweight, but it helps you with the common REST functions. But otherwise, it doesn't do data flattening for you. You still get the data as an R object that you still got to do some more work on, but it's a useful tool to get started if you use R. The Simplifier.net publishing platform is a web tool, a web service, so it is cross-platform. And this is where, if you're developing your own profiles, if you're standing up your own server that clients will be using, this is what you can use as a publishing platform to describe to clients how to use your FHIR server, how they should be sending your data in. So you would develop your profiles, you can upload them to a Simplifier project, and then you can create an implementation guide out of them. And an implementation guide is the compilation of all your profiles, as well as the prose that describes your business use case, where you can add diagrams on the workflows that will be happening there. And once you've created your implementation guide, you've published it, you can give it to a developer. So the idea is that you publish it, you give it to the developer can read the implementation guide, they can understand how to use your system, they can understand what queries they need to get to send to get data out of it, or to add data into it. So Simplifier does profile rendering. So if you create your profile of Forge, you can upload it online, you will get a visual representation of your profile. It does validation of instances. So if you create some sample instance data and you upload your profile, you can hit validate, and Simplifier will validate your instance against the profile. It also has like a gist paste bin feature for FHIR things. So if you have a FHIR resource and you want to share it with somebody else, you can upload it there. So Simplifier is a tool that is useful during the development phase. You wouldn't really be using it at runtime at all. So there is no patient data, for example, in Simplifier, none at all. But this is useful for the development phase of your project. Okay. Next, we have Torinox command line tool. This is a bit of a Swiss Army knife of all FHIR operations. With this tool, you can create a FHIR package, or you can unpack a FHIR package. You can validate an instance locally. You can upload instances with it, and you can create FHIR bundles or unbundle bundles. It's a handy little thing to keep around, or also use as part of your CI pipeline if you need to do some FHIR operations. It's useful for that. And I'll show you an example later on. Next is our Vonk FHIR server, which is cross-platform. You can run it locally on your Linux, Mac, Windows machine. You can run it in the cloud. You can run it in Kubernetes. And this is what we will use both during development and actually during runtime. If you need a place to store FHIR instances, if you need a place to store FHIR data, you can use our FHIR server for it. You can also use it to expose existing data. So if you're not building a greenfield solution, but you have an existing database, you can build a facade which will map to your database. So clients can use the FHIR to access your data, and then Vonk facade will go directly to your database, retrieve the data, and send it back out, as well as have a pretty powerful search capability. I would say Vonk is pretty good. It even does unit conversion. So if you store all your data in pounds, for example, and somebody comes along asking, hey, how can I get all patients that are over so many kilograms? It'll do that unit conversion for you on the fly. So the search capabilities in Vonk are pretty powerful. Not just unit conversion, but there's also a whole host of advanced search parameters that are supported. And it's Simplifier enabled as well. So if you want to stand up your FHIR server as something that Simplifier apps can connect to, Vonk can help you with that as well. Vonk loader tool. If you have 5,000 resources and you want to load them into a FHIR server and you don't want to do each one individually in Postman, you can use this tool to zip them all up and send them up in bulk. So this is pretty handy. I use it myself when I'm setting up a CI pipeline for testing. For example, if I need to populate a server, any kind of server, I can use Vonk loader, give it all of my FHIR instances, and it'll send them up. And the wind tunnel performance tool, this is in case you're building your own FHIR server, in case you don't want to use Vonk, you will probably be interested in how it performs. And this tool can help you show time over time how your performance is doing. So that is for a quick overview. Next I'll go into the demo, but what questions do we have from the overview?
On the Vonk FHIR server, where you mentioned the search, powerful search.
Yeah.
Is that also valid if it was using a facade mode only, where the database is our own custom?
Yes.
But it is just
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the nice things about it. Yes.
can still do the search, powerful search.
Yes, that's right. Yep. Any other questions? No? Okay, so for a bit of a demo, I can start off and I can show you how our .NET API works. Can everybody see that in the back? Okay, awesome. So this is a C# program, but as you can see, I'm not running it in Windows. I'm running this in Ubuntu here, so this is all cross-platform stuff you can use pretty much everywhere. So what we will do here is we'll create a sample patient resource and we'll upload it to our Vonk instance. This is how you can use the .NET API. I'm going to be using the Pocos here. So auto-completion works pretty nicely with this. To create a new patient, you just use new patient. It's pretty simple. To add a new identifier. So identifier in FHIR is a 0 to many field, which means that in C# it's represented as a list or as an individual element. So hence why I do a patient identifier, which is of generic list. And then you add a new identifier with a sample system and some value. Same goes for name. Name is a 0 to many in FHIR. You can have a patient can have many names. So we add a new list of a collection. If a field in FHIR is bound to a value set, that's a required value, so which means we can't add any new codes to it, then those values are available as enums in the C# API. So here the human name use official is bound as an enum, and we can pick some other names from there. Given again is a list in FHIR, so we add a new list object in there. But family and text are pretty simple. And I've commented this part out. I'll show you later how it works. But this is how you can build up your patient, basically. The API is pretty straightforward. To pre-print our resource back out, you just create a new FHIR JSON serializer. You serialize the string, and you put it out there. So that's pretty obvious. And to upload, the FHIR client wraps the HTTP client with some nice operations to it. So to upload our patient, I create a new FHIR client. I set the preferred format with JSON. So when the client is communicating with the server, it'll be using the JSON. So it'll set the request headers for us automatically to use JSON. And then here I call the create operation. So in FHIR, this will call an HTTP post for us with the patient that we've just created here. And one nice thing about the FHIR API, what I've discovered while using it here, is there's a last result field, and this last result is, the last result that you've done with. So you don't have to store anything else. You can just check the last result. If it's okay, we'll print it out. So here I have Vonk running locally. So I'm going to run this little program, and I'll show you that it uploads. So here is our serialization. When we've created our patient, we've serialized it. This is how it looks like. And then down here, we can see that we've uploaded to our local Vonk server. So when I go and look at this URL in the browser, you can see it's local. And I want it in JSON. We can see that here's our patient that we just created with the API and uploaded up to our server. So that's pretty simple. Any questions so far, or is it all pretty self-explanatory?
Is that a browser plugin?
No, it's for standard Firefox feature to display JSON. But you can also click on raw data. Here's the JSON. Now, next, let's say you're the one who is accepting data, so you want to create a profile and put some screws in the profile. Let's say we want to make sure that in the data that we have, the patient's birth date is filled out. Here we didn't fill out the birth date. So what we can do is we can go to Forge and we can create a new profile. This is how Forge looks like. Its operation is folder-based. So you open up a folder, and this is where all of your profiles will go. Make a new folder. And it'll open up and it'll load the core FHIR specification, which takes a bit of time. But after it does that, we can go and create a new patient profile. So you can see that with Forge you can create extensions, which you can use in profiles to extend the FHIR data model in case you have some data that isn't available. You can also create logical models. It's a bit of an advanced use case, as well as new search parameters and operation definitions. But for profile, we'll create a new profile, and we will use, not parameters, but we'll use patient. We'll create a new patient resource. We'll use the default canonical URL, and the canonical URL of a profile is just a unique string that identifies a profile. Here it's an HTTP URL, but it doesn't have to resolve. The main part is that it's a unique string to identify this profile. So I hit OK. And this is an STU3 profile. This is how it looks like, exactly like in the specification. So if we go to the specification, STU3 station.html, all of this that we see here is represented in Forge over here, right? And so to use Forge, you can see, for example, that identifier has a star, which means 0 to many cardinality. You can have no identifiers, you can have 1, 2, 3, or 10 identifiers. And if you want to put constraints, you just change them here. So here, if I want to block any identifiers, if I want to remove them entirely, as in any data that comes in that has an identifier should be rejected, I can do it like this, and it's crossed out. But I'll change this back to default. And birth date, you see with birth date is 0 to 1, so you don't have to fill in a birth date, or you can provide one birth date. I can change this to 1 to 1, so it's mandatory now. And what I'll do is I'll go and save my profile, save it here with a default name. Now, what I need to do now is I need to go to my Vonk server and I need to go load this profile in so I can validate incoming resources against this profile, right? So to do that, I can use Postman, and Vonk has an administration RESTful API that I can use to load data into it. And if I want to load resources into it, it pretty much mirrors the FHIR API. So if I want to load my structure definition that I just created, I go to localhost /administration/structure definition. So the administration part is the key part that will make Vonk consider it, instead of just storing my profile and not doing anything with it. So if I to a new profile that I've created, I open it up. I can see that the profile is pretty minimal. Here in my differential, we can see that I've only modified one thing, which is the patient.birthdate, and I've set the minimum cardinality to 1. Yep.
Do one of the two CLI tools support uploading this, or?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. But I'll just do it with Postman, just so it's for example's sake. So I'll copy the profile, and here I have an explanation, JSON. I'm running a local Vonk, so I've turned on authorization just so it's simple. But in production, you wouldn't even have administration endpoint exposed at all. Yeah. Or at least limited to IPs. One can also do that. You can give a whitelist of IP.
Another interface besides the HTTP?
Yes. Yes, you can also give it, for example, a local folder of your conformance resources, and on startup, Vonk will read that folder. You'll read all the profiles that are in there, and it'll load them up as well. There's a whole variety of options. You can also give it a Simplifier project where your profiles are defined, and it'll go and pull them from there as well. So I hit send, and it created my profile, which is nice. So now Vonk is storing it, but it's still not going to be validating a resource against it, because I need to go into settings. I need to tell it to validate against those settings. So I'm going to open up my app settings. Vonk has pretty extensive configuration settings. I'll show the defaults, and the defaults are quite extensive. You can choose which database engine are you using. Vonk supports SQLite, which is convenient but not very production friendly. It supports MongoDB, and it supports SQL Server. You can turn on validation, which that is what we will do. And you can also choose which operations and interactions are supported. But for our use case, we're going to open up validation. We're going to turn on strict validation, which means that if a FHIR resource is malformed, it should get rejected if it's not complying to a FHIR syntax, as well as level full. So you can have off, which we sort of had before, or we can have core, which means it should only validate incoming resources against the core FHIR specification. But with full, it will validate against the core FHIR specification and any profiles that we specify. So here I'm going to enable the allowed profiles array, and you see this string. This is the canonical URL that we used in Forge. This is how we will identify this profile, right? So we enable it, and then we restart Vonk with those new settings. Okay, it's all done. So now I will try and send my profile to it again without having changed anything. And it was not successful because of client error, because resource with no profiles is not allowed. The error message could be a little better, but what it's saying is that our resource doesn't claim conformance to any profiles. It's still just a generic resource. So we need to claim conformance to the profile that we've just created, right?
So isn't patient a core profile?
It is a core profile, but it's not our resource that we've created. Here, it doesn't claim conformance to that my profile that we just had, right? It's still like a generic FHIR resource. So it is FHIR valid, but it's not valid, but it doesn't claim
The app setting, right, because you put
this.
strict or,
Yeah. So we need to put this string in our profile saying, hey, our instance conforms to this profile. So we do this. We create a new meta field, and the meta field we put in profile, and we say that we conform to this profile. But we'll claim conformance to it, but we won't actually put in the birth date. So if I run it again, you'll see that it fails because I still don't have a birth date field. See, instance count of patient.birthdate is 0, whereas within the specified cardinality is 1-to-1. So Vonk rejected our incoming data of our profile, even though we conform to a profile. We claimed.
Do you have any problem handling the fact that it currently already has a record that
Doesn't
comply
conform.
with the new app settings? So you earlier you had already uploaded a record,
Yeah,
so now it's considered invalid.
yeah, but it doesn't rescan. Like if you rescan it now, it would be invalid, yes, but no. The data is already stored, and
And if you try to like update it or request it, it doesn't.
if you request it, it'll happily give it back to you, but if you try and update it, Vonk will say, hey, sorry, it has to conform to the profile. So we uncomment the obvious field. We try uploading again. And it worked. Our resource was uploaded. So you can see how we've tightened the screws in the data that we're accepting. And in FHIR, there's a lot of optional fields that you might want to do that on. You can tell Vonk to only consider those resources that are conforming to your profile, and then it'll do the validation for you. Yeah,
So this also applies to the facade use case also.
exactly. Yep.
So
Yep.
basically, if you are running the FHIR server, you are the server side, and someone is making a Postman query,
Yes.
it's during the save operation is when the validation is happening.
Yes.
So can you have multiple profiles?
Yes. As in Vonk, you can load multiple profiles into Vonk, and your instance also can conform to multiple profiles as well. But, yeah?
Is there a way of saying like certain errors, yes, it's a hard stop, we won't accept this, but other ones are kind of more warnings that will still take the data?
Yes, with FHIR profiles you can. It's not done via cardinality, but with FHIR, are you familiar with FHIR path? Okay, so FHIR path can be used as a constraints language, as a custom constraints language. So it's more flexible than just setting cardinalities. And in FHIR profiling, you can have this field called constraints. And here, let's say I create a new element, new field, and here I can set the severity of my constraint. And then I can have a FHIR path describing whatever conditions I'd like. So that'll be a warning then. Anybody else want to ask me a question? Okay. So we've kind of had a whirlwind tour of a C# API, of how we can use it to upload things and how we can run Vonk and how we can constrain data. Next, let's say you want to publish your stuff, you want to publish a profile. So for that, you can go to simplifier.net. You can create a new project. I've created one already, FHIR tools demo. It's a pretty empty project right now, so I can upload my file to it. I can upload my profile. And the rendering that we saw in Forge will now be available online. You can go to Profiles, you go to My Patient, and you can see it's pretty familiar. And it's very clear what we've changed here. We've set the cardinality of birth date. We've changed it to 1. So you can create our profiles and you can upload them here. So when people go to your project, they can see, hey, here are all my profiles here. But you also want to be able to add some prose around, put in a nice package that you can give people to read. This is where implementation guides come in. Go to the Guides tab. You can create a new implementation guide. This is the implementation guide editor. On the left side, you have your navigation, so you can create new pages, new sibling pages, move them around. In the middle, you have the page editor, which is Markdown based. And on the right, you have a real-time preview. So I can click here, and it'll refresh me. So this is all standard Markdown that you're familiar with. And I can also render my profile right here using special tags that we've added. We have quite a few, but the one I'm going to use is render. And to render a tag, you specify the key of your project and then the key of your resource. So those two are unique across Simplifier. So if we go to my resource, here's my patient. Up on here, FHIR tools demo is the key of my project, and then my patient is the key of my resource, right? I can copy that in here, close the tag, render it, and here's my profile, which is customizing the birth date element on the patient profile. And then I can hit preview here. This is all pretty real time, and here's my implementation guide. Okay, it looks a little bit horrible right now, but we didn't spend too much time on it. Let's change the style to a 2-level menu. We refresh the page. It looks a little bit better. We can add more pages to it. Yeah, and then you can go and refresh the show, and you can see that I've created new pages here up on top. And each one of the pages I can fill with Markdown content. So you can see how it's a pretty powerful tool for creating an implementation guide very fast as well. It's all pretty much real time right here. And this is a URL that you can share with others. This is the published URL right here. And if you need to, you can also export your implementation guide as static HTML. So if you don't want a dependency on Simplifier, you can go and export your implementation guide as well to give it out to others. Any questions about that?
I'm curious, can you say a few words about the ability to use Simplifier or the lack of it, whichever it is at this point, for creating implementation guides that can be officially published by HL7,
Yes.
where we're at with that, and what can folks do if we've already, like I said, we've been working with IG Publisher, and we would like to also expose it by Simplifier. How would
Yes.
we deal with that?
Yes. So, HL7 has some pretty strict requirements on the publication. So we've been working, and first of all, we've added a new Battle HL7-like style, which should help HL7 accept your guide better. With this, it looks a bit more like an HL7 guide. And you can also edit the complete template if you need to customize this further. Where they are at right now with the export is, Martijn would be the best person to talk about it, but the very latest as I know is that even though the UI, the look and feel is okay there, I think Graham still has some points about packaging as well as how the rendering of resources looks like. But talk to Graham at DevDays, he's the one who's really involved in that discussion.
What is the plan to get to that point? Sure.
Working very hard on it. Definitely working very hard on it, yes. Well, yeah.
So again, very new to this, but which tools will you be using? So let's say the implementation, sorry, the profile created using Forge, that should be generic, can be used by anyone, right? Like
Yes.
I wanted someone else to use
Yes,
profile,
it will go into any server, it will go into Happy, it will go into any other server. That is standard FHIR.
so that profile is standard, can go to Happy.
Yeah, yeah.
The API that you showed us, the first one,
Yeah.
is that also standard, can go on any server, or is it only one
Yeah.
server?
No, it goes on any server. And like Steve mentioned, Microsoft built their own open source server using the .NET API.
And when you call it, let's say SDK, that it
Yeah.
can be
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
And Simplifier.net is the portal, basically, HTML as well as graphics and all, to show you what all is there, right?
yes,
And
yep.
where does the capability statements and stuff, how does that come up when people are looking at it? Where do they see that?
You can, so if your server has a capability statement, well, Vonk has a capability statement, you can go to Vonk/metadata like. Yes, it got renamed conformance statement, capability statement, yes. So here's Vonk's capability statement, you can view it here. You can see what resources it accepts. It's an array, it's an array.
Generated by Vonk, or is it maintained by the
It is generated by Vonk on demand, depending on how your Vonk is configured.
Is annotation in there, in those resources?
This doesn't expose the actual data.
My patient profile that you made.
Well, let's see. Well, let's let me search. Copy. Nope. It can actually support which profiles this server supports. Yes. Yes.
Because what I'm trying to understand is, if someone is looking at my capabilities,
Yes.
they would be looking at the capability statement, or they'll be going to the implementation guide is where I'm giving them all this.
The software will be looking at the capability statement. So if you want to make one app that works with many FHIR servers and you want it to, progressively enable features as the server supports them, the software would look at the capability statement. But the human developer, they would go to the implementation guide. That's the part intended for humans. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? No? Good. Well, I think we're at time, so thank you, everybody. Hope that was helpful.